The icy cold water whipped across Peter Parker's face through the torn fabric of his mask, mixing with blood and dirt into a sticky stream. He swung past the skyscrapers of New York, but today, there were no cheers, no spontaneous wisecracks from above. Today, the city was silent, a terrifying silence, choked by ambulance sirens, cries of grief, and the acrid smell of hot rubble. Queens, his neighborhood, looked like a toy model crushed underfoot by a giant, vicious child. A gouge tore through 3 blocks of houses, ending in a massive impact crater where the SHIELD armored truck was crumpled like paper. Giant footprints, each step a deep pit, were stamped into the asphalt. Hulk. That name was no longer a scientific concept or a figure from the news. It was a hurricane, an earthquake in human form, a natural disaster that could roar. Peter had arrived late, too late. By the time he heard the commotion and changed into his suit, the battle between the Green Giant and some bizarre gamma entity had entered its final act, and the city was always on the losing side. He perched on the edge of a collapsed building, looking down. A firefighter was carrying a child in his arms. The kid wasn't crying, eyes wide open, vacant, staring at the debris that was once home. A few meters away, a white-haired old woman clutched a warped picture frame, tears streaming silently down her face. Peter felt a searing pain in his chest, a pain worse than any physical wound he had ever endured. These were not just statistics on TV. This was pain in flesh and blood, lives torn apart. You said it, Peter. With great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben's voice echoed in his head. But what was the responsibility here? How do you take responsibility for a power that isn't yours, a rage that cannot be controlled? SHIELD would hunt him. The army would try to cage him. But had anyone ever truly warned him? Had anyone ever told the creature, or the man hiding inside it, just how deep the scars of their actions go? In that moment, Peter made a decision, an insane decision. He would find Bruce Banner. He would talk to him, not as an avenger, not as an enemy, but as a neighbor, someone who had witnessed the aftermath of that fury. He would warn him, a warning not delivered by force, but by the brutal truth that Banner had always been trying to run from. The hunt began. Peter was no detective, but he was a scientist. In his small room, under the glow of a computer screen, he and Ned analyzed energy patterns. Gamma bursts left a very specific radioactive signature, faint and quickly dissipating, but not impossible to trace. Ned, the tech genius, had borrowed data from a university atmospheric monitoring satellite. They tracked a faint emerald trail, moving north, away from the city center, stopping at an old industrial complex by the river. Peter carried no special weapons. He had no intention of fighting. He only carried his Spider-Man suit, a few spare web cartridges, and most importantly, an old digital recorder. That was his real weapon. He wanted to record the conversation, not as evidence, but so that Bruce Banner, when lucid, could listen back to his own words, spoken in despair. It would be the most honest and brutal warning he could ever receive. The rain was still relentless as Peter landed on the roof of an abandoned warehouse. The air here was cold and damp, thick with the smell of rust and old machine oil. Every sense he had was stretched taut, and he felt him, not by sound, but by a primal vibration in the air, an invisible pressure bearing down on the atmosphere. A colossal sadness was hiding in the shadows of this place. He lowered himself to the ground as silently as possible, landing on the wet concrete. In a pitch-black corner, under the only flickering light of an industrial bulb, a figure was huddled. Bruce Banner. He sat there, in an oversized coat, knees drawn up, his gaunt face buried in his arms. He didn't look like one of the greatest minds on the planet, much less an invincible monster. He was simply a shattered man. Peter didn't attack. Instead, he crouched down, trying to make himself smaller, bringing his eyes level with Bruce. The distance between them was a chasm of power, but in this moment, they were just two lonely human beings. Dr. Banner. His voice rang out, not loud, but clear in the stillness. "I'm Peter Parker." Bruce's head snapped up, his eyes full of the panic and wariness of a cornered animal. "Spider-Man, you need to leave. Right now. It's not safe, I know." Peter slowly raised both hands, signaling he meant no harm. "I've just come from Queens." The name Queens struck Bruce like an invisible knife. He flinched, eyes squeezing shut. I don't remember anything. Just a blank. Then I woke up here. My God. How many people? 7 apartments completely destroyed. A kindergarten partially damaged. Fortunately, no children were there at that hour, Peter said, his voice flat, trying to suppress his emotions. He didn't speak with a tone of blame. He was simply stating facts, like a report. But it was this naked truth that was the most devastating. There was an old woman, I guess in her 70s, sitting on the wreckage of her home. She wasn't crying, just clutching a wedding photo, water-stained and blurred. I wondered if the husband in the photo had passed away long ago, and that house was all she had left of him. "Stop." Bruce's voice was hoarse, pleading. His body began to tremble violently. It wasn't from the cold. It was an internal seismic shock, a harbinger of an eruption. "You don't understand. You can't understand. It is in me. It is a part of me. I have tried. I have tried so hard. But it's like another beast, just waiting for my weakness, my anger, or even my fear, to break out." "I don't need to understand, doctor," Peter replied, his voice eerily calm. "I just need you to understand. You say you don't remember anything. Then let me tell you. Do you want to know how a child feels watching a green whirlwind crush their world? It's the same feeling I had when I was 8 years old, watching my parents board a plane and never come back. Absolute helplessness." Peter's words were a slap. Bruce's mouth fell open, speechless, and then, in the depths of his eyes, a fierce green light flickered. Anger, pain, guilt, all mixed into a cataclysmic whirlwind of emotion. "You don't get to," Bruce roared, his voice distorted, far deeper. It was no longer the sound of a human being. The ground shook. Peter immediately leaped back, his spider sense screaming in his skull. He had anticipated this. This was the gamble he had to play. Bruce Banner shot to his feet, his body beginning to swell terrifyingly. Clothes ripped apart, pale skin turned a glowing green, massive cords of muscle surging like ropes. The first roar from that colossal chest was enough to blow out every remaining window in the warehouse. Hulk was awake, and this time he was angrier than ever. He wasn't just provoked, he was wounded. And the one who had wounded him was a tiny spider standing right in front of him. Hulk smashed little spider. It was not a threat, it was a declaration. Peter didn't wait. He shot a web strand to the highest rafter and launched himself into the air, bursting straight through the decaying roof of the warehouse. Hulk roared, leaping after him, his jump tearing away an entire section of concrete wall. The Battle of David and Goliath officially began. But this was not a battle of strength. Peter Parker knew full well that one punch from Hulk was enough to turn him into a red smear on the ground. This was a battle of speed, of agility, and of tactics. More importantly, this was a battle of control. He could not afford to let Hulk get any angrier, but he also could not let him turn back toward populated areas. And so, a deadly chase unfolded in the rainy night. Spider-Man, in his tattered suit, shot like a bullet between industrial buildings, a red and blue lure. Behind him, Hulk was an unstoppable wrecking ball. Every step the giant took shattered asphalt. Every missed swipe crushed a brick wall. Peter deliberately led him toward the Staten Island scrapyard, a place he had visited a few times to find spare parts for Aunt May's car. It was a labyrinth of steel, a perfect arena, and most importantly, completely devoid of people. Once there, the real fight began. Here, on familiar terrain, Peter was in his element. He used his webs like ropes, hurling massive chunks of metal at Hulk. A container door flew straight into the giant's face, making him stagger. He shot webs onto a magnetic crane, steering it to sweep across the yard, dropping tons of scrap iron onto the green giant. "Sorry, big guy," Peter shouted, a hint of madness in his voice. "But you need to calm down a bit." But all those attacks, no matter how creative, were mere mosquito bites to Hulk. They did not injure him, they only made him angrier, and the angrier Hulk got, the stronger he became. With a furious roar, Hulk smashed apart the pile of metal on top of him as if it were paper mache. His emerald eyes swept across the scrapyard and locked onto his target. He no longer chased blindly. He had learned. And then, he picked up a wrecked car beside him and hurled it with terrifying speed. The tingling sensation in Peter's skull erupted into a deafening scream. He tried to dodge, but the throw was too fast and too sudden. The car didn't hit him directly, but its rear end clipped him, making him feel like he had been hit by a freight train. His body flew like a broken marionette, slamming into the side of a container before crashing to the ground. Everything went black for a few seconds. When Peter opened his eyes, the rain was still falling. The pain from his ribs made it hard to breathe. He staggered to his feet, but a gigantic hand, hard as steel, grabbed his head and lifted him off the ground. Peter could feel the monstrous pressure tightening around his skull. His mask was torn in half, revealing a bloodied face. and a youthful eye staring directly into the abyss of rage. Hulk brought him close to that hideous face, his hot breath washing over Peter. Spider, no more tricks. This was the moment Peter Parker faced death, but instead of fear, a strange calm washed over him. This was the moment for his real weapon. With his free hand, trembling and weak, he fumbled in his pocket and pulled out the small recorder. With a motion of his thumb, he pressed play. Amid the falling rain, the howling wind, and the monster's growls, another sound emerged, faint, anguished, yet devastatingly clear. It was the recorded voice. I can't control it. I just want peace. It was Bruce Banner's voice, a voice filled with despair and loneliness. Hulk's green eyes flickered. The pressure on Peter's head eased slightly. The giant tilted his head, like a child trying to understand something complicated. He recognized that voice. It came from inside him. It was the pain he was trying to protect. It was the enemy, and also the hostage. Seizing the moment of hesitation, Peter whispered. He was not speaking to Hulk. He was speaking to the man imprisoned within. I know. You're in there, Bruce. And I know you're more afraid than anyone else on this earth. But the people in Queens, they're afraid too. That kid I saw, he's afraid. You have to hear them, not just your own anger. This is my only warning, not from Spider-Man, but from your neighbor. Next time, if you can't control it, run somewhere where there's no one. Because the scars you leave behind, they never heal. That was the warning, not an ultimatum. It was a plea for compassion, wrapped in brutal truth. A silence fell. Then Hulk tilted his head back to the sky and let out a roar. But this roar was different. It was no longer pure rage. It was pain, the ultimate tearing apart of a divided soul. It was the roar of a weeping god. He let Peter go. The boy dropped to the ground, clutching his aching ribs. Hulk stepped back, pounding his own chest, his own head, as if trying to beat a demon inside. The punches were so powerful they created sonic booms, and then he turned and fled. Each step took him further away, deeper into the night and the rain, until he was just a faint green dot, then vanished completely. The air returned to stillness. Peter struggled to his feet. His whole body felt like a rag. He had won. But there was no joy of victory, only a vast sadness and emptiness. He picked up the recorder, its casing cracked but still functioning. He limped over to Bruce Banner, now returned to human form, lying unconscious in a puddle, naked and shivering. Peter took off his own torn outer jacket and draped it over Bruce. He placed the recorder into Banner's clenched palm, along with a slip of paper smeared by the rain. On it was the address of a psychological crisis support center, a place that helped the homeless and victims of superhuman disasters. Then, without another word, Spider-Man shot one last web strand into the night and vanished. He did not know if his warning would truly change anything. He did not know if next time Hulk would still be a storm of destruction. But he knew one thing: he had not given up. He had faced the most destructive force on the planet, not with his fists, but with the truth. And in the cold rain, Bruce Banner slowly opened his eyes. He recognized the recorder in his hand. With still trembling hands, he pressed play again. His own anguished voice and the words of Spider-Man echoed once more. He listened, his gaunt face drenched, no telling if it was rain or tears. Then he looked at the slip of paper in his hand. A faint glimmer, not the green of gamma, but the light of something far rarer, flickered in the depths of his eyes. Hope. The battle was over. The victor was not the strongest, but the one who dared to stand up for the most fragile things. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Thank you all very much.